Hello my friends, I'm Bianca, the Ticking Time Blonde. We got flipped back in today with a second round of the 3-watch collection. Welcome back into the studios. Good to see you again.
Thanks for having me back. I almost feel like I'm John Mayer, just coming around to show some more watches.
So last time we did talk a lot about, your philosophy, what makes you tick when purchasing watches. Was it hard to come up with these 3 we have in today for the second round?
I think the first round was most complicated because it was really like, okay, what are you choosing? Because of course it's part of like what story are you telling and what sense does your collection make? Which in my case, my collection doesn't make a lot of sense, as you know. Okay, getting that out of the way, then you can move on to things you have not talked about, and then it becomes a little bit more easy, and then you just choose pieces which are maybe representing a different part of your collection.
I was going to say, the trio you brought in today, it looks like a very eclectic collection.
Yeah.
So let's not waste any time, let's get straight into it.
Yeah, let's do it. I chose a little bit from, let's say, old to middle age to new. I thought, okay, maybe it's nice to go a little bit into vintage, neo vintage, and, well, brand new, but still a little bit vintage style. First watch, let's go all the way back in time, is a Omega, a diving watch, but I think it's the most ridiculous diving watch there is. It
does not look like your typical diver.
No, I don't think anybody would dive on a leather strap anyway, but in 1969 apparently Omega thought people needed a leather strapped diving watch. At the same time a chronograph. I would not know why you need a chronograph underwater because it's not like things go very fast down there. And it is also a bullhead, and bullhead means the buttons for the chronograph are on top instead of the side.
Okay.
Which is like an old school stopwatch, which is essentially cool. Underwater again, makes no sense. The chronograph bullhead style is really nice. Inside you have the diving bezel, which normally is on the outside. On, for instance, your watch, on the Tudor, on the outside you have the minutes. When you go diving, you put that arrow to your minute hand, so you know exactly how long you've been underwater, which is quite useful. Normally they're unidirectional, so you cannot accidentally make your dive time longer or shorter. So you think, oh, I'm only 10 minutes underwater, and you're already there for an hour, because when you dive, your oxygen runs up, but your nitrogen goes up, and you can have all kinds of issues based on that. Being a completely useless and stupid diving watch, to start with, I think Omega also found that out quite quickly and decided to discontinue this bullhead after a year or maybe a year and a half. That said, makes it very rare and makes it indeed quite eclectic.
Yeah, certainly unique. I've not seen a divers like this. And have you put it to the test many times, or?
I don't trust it. So I think if the watch is, well, how old is it now? 60 years or something. I didn't test it. You can send it to Omega or to specialists and have it completely revamped. I just enjoy it for what it is. I do like how they make the case shape ergonomical, so it stands up when you're on your wrist and tilts towards you a little bit. The loom still works at night, it glows, and it has this. It's essentially also radioactive, so let it just be nice and closed. So the tritium, which makes the loom, which makes the hands glow and makes the numbers glow. It's a cool oddity, and that's why I love it. The size for me is perfect, so it sits on my wrist really nicely, so I very much enjoy it.
So being a vintage watch, was it hard to come across? Like, how did you find it?
Yeah, so there's a couple of famous bullheads. I don't know if you ever saw Brad Pitt in the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He's wearing a bullhead Citizen, which is a very iconic watch. This one is an iconic bullhead, and there's like one or maybe a couple more out there. So I always wanted a bullhead as a weird complication in my collection, and this was the one I happened to come across, or at least I found. I like Omega. Omega is a brand that's close to my heart. Maybe it's a brand which I probably have the most watches of Omega, because I like the vintage models, I like the current models, I like the very strange models. So it's also one of the watches my dad used to have. So for me, yeah, there's always a cool Omega somewhere to be found.
Do you have many vintage watches in your collection at the moment?
I think I can make a decent vintage mini collection, but they're all a little bit eclectic, a little bit off the normal path, because especially in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of weird watches coming out, which were actually really cool and very interesting. It's nice to have some, well, variable, cool, different watches.
Thank you for bringing that one in. I'm pretty sure I won't see an Omega like that ever again, so yeah. I appreciate you bringing that in as your
my pleasure.
Now that next one looks like it's got a bit of weight to it.
Yeah, that's a pretty literally heavy hitter. This is a Gérald Genta. That's also a brand you don't really come across that often, but the name is quite famous for most watch collectors. Gérald Genta was the famous designer who made the AP Royal Oak, for instance, or the Patek Aquanaut. He did IWC Engineer, which now was released recently as well. He did some designs for Bulgari. Gérald Genta made a lot of iconic watches. This one is one of the first micro brands, because at some point after designing all these watches and those watches being successful and popular, he probably thought, let me start my own brand and just do it the way I want it. And then he made a series of quite weird watches. So I don't know if you've ever seen watches with Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck playing golf in there. Like the golf club does the minutes and the hours, and then it goes back to start and it goes all over again. He somehow was fan of a complication called retrograde, which means the minutes or the date or even sometimes the seconds don't go all the way around the dial, but they go from point A to point B and then swoop back to point A. So essentially,
Interesting.
What you're seeing here is that's why the, let's say, zeros are here and the 60s are there. When it goes to 60, then you will see now it says 7. When you pass 60, it's at 0, but this goes at 8. So it's jumping hours, so it jumps between the hours, also doesn't go smooth. Retro minutes. So again, we go 30, 40, 50, 55, 60, and now it goes to the 9 and it's back to 0. So that's sort of how the time develops. Here at the bottom, you see the date, which also goes to 31 and sometimes 30, and then it jumps back to 1 again when it's the next month. So this one is called a retrograde arena, I think is the model name. But yeah, this is the most bizarre version of it because it's full on rose gold. There's a tantalum bezel on it. We talked about tantalum last time. This is what tantalum looks like when it's not polished, which is also extremely heavy.
I like the contrast between the matte and the high polish finish.
Yeah, so
really effective.
Really cool version. There's some matte rose gold on it as well. Yeah, he's a designer, so he did a great job. There's some guilloche here at the bottom. I put it on a different strap. I don't necessarily believe in always having the same strap on watches. It's
mix it up a bit.
Changing your wheels on a car just makes it a completely different watch. This is like a Stingray leather strap, which I think fits perfectly. Other people might not agree, but they can buy their own and put their own strap on it.
It's quite a statement piece. So when would you wear this? Was there certain occasions you would wear this one?
Sometimes it's nice to wear a very flashy watch when you're dressed like a bum, and sometimes it's nice to wear a clunker when you're completely dressed up. So I would wear my sneakers with a tuxedo as well. So for me, I think whenever I feel like it, I just wear whatever I feel like.
Yeah.
Well. And if people have an opinion, that's great for them. But as long as I feel happy and
That's
think
the
I'm
main
okay,
point.
then I'm totally fine. It would be normally too big for me, but it's 46 millimeters, I think. But because the lugs are so short, actually it's perfect on my wrist, even though 42, 43 is my perfect size.
I appreciate you bringing that one in today. It's just such a unique piece. Such a unique piece.
It's
And I bet
very,
you wear it
very
well.
different. But the funny thing is, people love it or hate it, but watch collectors always appreciate it because they know the history of Gérald Genta. Also, indeed, he started his own, let's say, independent brand before the hype of the independent brands, way before that hype. It failed because I don't think the world was ready for massive rose gold, crazy, no brand, essentially complicated watches. But then in the end, Bulgari bought Gérald Genta, so they're still using his complications, still using parts of his designs. So it sort of still lives on. I think we should be grateful for brands like Bulgari and LV in a certain way too.
Yeah.
And Swatch, because also Swatch has saved the Swiss watch industry essentially, because everything was going down the drain when the digital watches were coming, the Seikos were coming, but keeping those brands around, keeping those brands alive, part of the hobby we enjoy today.
Thank you. What do we have for your last piece there?
Last piece, we go more, it looks maybe a bit vintagey, but that's because there's like old school complications mixed with new school colors. Van der Klaauw, Christiaan van der Klaauw, another Dutch brand. It's pretty much, I would say, an upcoming brand. They've been around for, I think, 50 years this year. I'm just saying this top of my mind, maybe it's 60, but let's just hold on to 50, just to be sure. Very old Dutch watchmaker, which has been running the brand by himself. Then it got bought or other people bought in. Then it went maybe a little bit more to the marketing side. But recently, another Dutch master watchmaker, Pim Koeslag, he bought the brand and he is now running it, revamping some models. They're very much driven by astrology. So they're much an astrology brand. This is their base model. It's a special edition in this beautiful blue.
Very attractive.
Yeah, on a very nice strap as well. You can see all the detailing, like the numbers in this heat blued hands. On the back, you can see their signature logo, essentially half of their logo, but also the rotor is engraved by Jochen Benzinger, which is like a German engraving and Yosh specialist. I thought this is a good watch to bring because this is a watch when I hear people ask me, what should I buy for a normal amount of money? This is, I think, 10,000 US or a bit less.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of watch for the money. Personally, love it. The straps are the same straps as I have on my Grenfell actually. So there's a lot of stuff that goes in there, but also it's a annual calendar. So it indeed has the day, the month, the day of the week. It has a moon phase in there, and it's, well, a bit different because the color is quite poppy.
Yeah, and practicality meets astrology.
Yeah, it is. It is. They have much more complicated watches as well, which, they have the most accurate moon phase in the world, I think. They have watches that tell you the tides. It's like, okay, is it high tide, low tide, but also throughout the month and throughout the years. And they have one watch, which is essentially the smallest planetarium in the world, which is based on some Dutch guy in the 1500s or something who made a planetarium in the ceiling of his house, which he lived. And that house is like 10 square meters, I guess. It's like the old Dutch house. And there's living rooms where I slept as well. But somehow his wife allowed him to make a planetarium in the ceiling. And it's still working nowadays. So
wow.
It just became like a World Heritage Site by UNESCO or whatever it is. And they shrunk that down. It's still running on time in the official ceiling, 500 something years old. But they shrunk it down to a watch size so you can see where, well, it's 6 planets. So it's not all the planets because back then in the 1500s they didn't even know there's 8 planets yet. So it's just...
And the world was flat then.
The world was flat as well. It's like, okay, there's some things going to the sky and everything was still basic. So it's based on 6 planet setup, but you can see where at that moment any of the planets should be. So Neptune should be over there. But this is their starting watch, which I think is a great watch. And I really enjoy it. And I thought based on these 3, that would be a very lovely one to bring along as well.
Awesome. Have you bought all of these in person or have you bought any online and had any challenges with your purchases online?
I think online I rarely bought watches, mainly like a Kickstarter or a really basic watch, which, okay, if it fails or it's terrible, then it's okay, it's not too much money. But when I buy more expensive watches, I try to, well, go there myself, try them on, see if they're indeed as nice in real life as they are in pictures. Sometimes they disappoint, actually, sometimes they're actually nicer in real life. So for instance, the last watch we talked about, if you don't really see the heat blued numbers in pictures, but if you see it in real life, then you go, oh wow, it's actually so much more special. For me, it's also very important to have the watch on my wrist to feel the size and feel the weight and feel if it's comfortable.
And so you do travel a lot. How do you go with selecting a certain amount of watches and what do you kind of stick to for your travels?
Yeah, it's a little bit where you travel to, of course. I luckily can just then convert to less known brands and watches that nobody would blink an eye at.
Yeah,
and that's still pretty safe. But it's also mainly, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to do some trekking to Peru and some wild water rafting or surfing? And then I'll probably bring a couple of waterproof, durable watches, which if they get damaged, if something happens, I would not cry too hard about. Or if there's a special event or something, and then you bring a special piece or something that is more celebrational. Is that the right way to say it? It's good to have a big box to choose from, and that's also why I like to keep quite a lot of watches around in many, many different levels. So always, for any purpose or any occasion, I can pick something and, well, even match it to my clothes if needed, just like you're doing today.
Speaking of, what's on your wrist today?
So you have, let's say, mainstream brands, then you have independent brands, and then you have micro brands. And this is a watch by a Russian watchmaker. It's called Sergey Chutov. This is a watch I actually ordered online, but it's 42 millimeters, so I was pretty sure it would be a good fit for me. Yep. Every different style watch he makes, he only makes 3 of them. So every run of every different model, it's only 3 watches, then doesn't make more and doesn't sell more, and then he starts a new design. I was lucky enough to find him somehow very early. I don't know, thank you, Instagram algorithms, to bump into him. I actually have his first watch, which is not this watch, which to me is like, okay, that's something I don't have. That's something I think is really cool. So I contacted him, and then it's a super lovely guy. He used to be a judge or something and then decided to go into watchmaking. We stayed in contact ever since. And he does very cool, simple, nicely designed things. It's also not a super expensive watch. Like I know last time I had some very serious watches with me. It's not always John Mayer time. Sometimes you just wear normal watches and just have some fun. It's also, I've been very lucky through my journey to at some point buy watches then which appreciate it. And then, okay, if somebody wants to pay me 5 times more for a watch than I paid for it, then of course everybody can have that watch, because for me it's not worth that kind of money. But from the money a watch then generates, I can buy something else or multiple other watches. And I'm definitely not in it to make money of it. But okay, if somebody wants my watch that bad, I'm happy to let it go.
Now, this is your second time on the channel. Even if we haven't talked about the watches previously, was there a really memorable highlight or an experience that you had with a certain watch, where the feel it gave you, where you got it from, or how you came about?
That's, I think, the beauty as well. That's also why I have like an emotional attachment to way too many watches. But there's of course a couple of them which are more special in that way than others. I do have another Van der Klaauw, which indeed is a planetarium, like I talked about with the planets in there. Yep. When I found the watch first, let's say also 3 years ago or something, I should have known earlier, because they also won GPHG many years ago as the best astrological watch. But okay, I was a bit blind for Dutch watches somehow. I don't know what happened there. One of the dealers was from my hometown. And actually it was one of my old high school friends, which I hadn't seen for 20 years. And I decided through my Instagram, which has not my name or my face or anything on there, to send a message like, do you have one of these planetariums in stock maybe? I would love to see one. And of course it's not a very cheap watch, it's something special, but they were nice enough to answer and say, yes, we have one, and if you want, you can come have a look. And okay, I said, I'm not in Holland because I'm traveling and whatever, so when I'm in Holland, I will come by and say hi. And then of course I had a date and walked in on that date, and he's like, hey, that's fun. I didn't see you for years, and he still didn't know I was the guy who was coming for that watch.
Oh, wow.
So that's a coincidence. Oh, yeah, that's cool. And I'm visiting my mom and this and that. I said, do you have one of these planetariums maybe lying around? And he said, oh, that's funny. Somebody else also asked about it. So another guy coming today. Oh, that's interesting.
It was you.
That was me. Of course, at some point I had to reveal that it was me. He's like, no, that's so funny. Oh, cool. So we talked for hours about watches and life and whatever happened to us in the last 20 years. And then together we designed this piece unique, because it's a piece unique made by Van der Klaauw. So I was still luckily in time that they were not too busy yet, because now they're crazy busy. And they made me an amazing watch, because I wanted the meteorite dial, which is very special. That's also how I got to know the watchmaker, and how then you go to their shop somewhere in Holland and you finalize the design and you go pick it up together. So I think that's one of the more special watches. But every watch in my collection, I can sort of tell you how I got it, where I got it, why I got it, and that's why I keep them around essentially as well.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing that story. Flip, absolutely fantastic. Seeing you again. Rose to the challenge with another eclectic trio.
We can do this over and over again.
I'd love to.
Let other people take the table as well, but I'm always happy to come back. It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for re-inviting me. It's always great to be here, and I'm already looking forward to my next visit.
Thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
And guys, tell us what's in your 3-watch collection. Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, check out our other content. Help us out by hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next 3-watch collection.